Patricia Gibson.
Chair, and I want to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Beaconsfield for bringing forward this debate and the very considered way in which he set out his very powerful case. Indeed, we have seen in recent years increasingly allegations of abuse in care homes, and this has been the subject of television documentaries and newspaper reports, as the Honourable Gentleman has pointed out, and it's even given rise, Mr Chair, to parliamentary petitions in the past about how to deal with this. And we've heard today the case for the installation of CCTV cameras in communal areas in care homes, and it's easy to see how such cameras could help to prevent the kind of abuse we've heard about of vulnerable and elderly people. And we've certainly seen in the past how hidden surveillance has exposed some very disturbing and serious abuse of some very vulnerable people, and much of this has been long-standing, such as we've seen in, for example, to name one example, in the Winterbourne View Hospital, as the Honourable Gentleman for Montgomeryshire pointed out. However, I know, and this has already been referred to by the Honourable Lady, I know we don't want to let these shocking examples of poor care that have been publicised allow us to forget that some care homes, I would suggest perhaps the majority of our care homes, the vast majority of our care homes, provide excellent care to some of the most vulnerable members of our community right across the United Kingdom. However, some of the information set out for us today by the Right Honourable Member for Beaconsfield is truly shocking. And I think we can all agree there is a balance to be struck between protecting the vulnerable in care homes and protecting their privacy. And there can be no doubt that CCTV can be helpful in some circumstances. Indeed, the Mental Welfare Commission for Scotland pointed out there are serious human rights concerns and considerations in relation to the use of hidden surveillance, but we do not argue that it should never happen. And the Honourable Gentleman for Beaconsfield has pointed out that if it is to be purely introduced in communal areas, then perhaps the arguments about invasion of privacy become less urgent. If those receiving care have the capacity to consent to being filmed, then they must also have the right to refuse, and I think that was suggested by the Right Honourable Member for Montgomeryshire. No one should be placed under surveillance without their agreement. But if there is concern that a vulnerable person is being mistreated or abused in some way, then the local authority, of course, can consider other adult protection measures. Regardless of how well-intentioned, there can be no denying that the use of CCTV inevitably intrudes upon a person's privacy, even if it is restricted to communal areas. And we also have to be mindful that care homes are just that. They are people's homes. And in your home, you need to feel safe, secure and supported. Now, as for the suggestion that CCTV cameras in communal areas should become the norm, that might well be the case, but I can't help feeling that it's a really sad indictment of our society when across the board, staff as well as residents are subjected to this kind of monitoring. Some may say that this also will afford additional protection to staff as well as residents as they go about their duties. But it is rather sad, I think, if such monitoring were to become the norm. Although I do accept the argument from the Honourable Lady about reassuring relatives who are concerned about their elderly loved one. But of course, Mr Chair, the reason we're even debating this is because of some of the most alarming cases of abuse of vulnerable and elderly people, which has been exposed through secret filming. But it's important that although we take those examples extremely seriously, we do not allow ourselves to believe that this is a template for what happens everywhere and for how all staff behave. My own mother-in-law, a former Glasgow City Councillor, is living with dementia and is cared for in Haley House Care Home in Largs. And this care home is excellent. It has first-class staff who are cheerful, good-natured, and the care provided is second to none. When we put our vulnerable and elderly relatives into care homes, often with great reluctance, we need to be able to trust the staff. That is an essential part of the care process. We cannot allow the reports of abuse to allow us to forget the good work that's going on in the vast majority of our care homes. And Mr Chair, I think it would be wise at this juncture to take cognizance of the view of Age UK that we must take care that CCTV may well provide false assurances in addition to potentially compromising the privacy of residents in care homes. The Chief Executive of Age UK, Caroline Abrahams, has warned that with all the media stories about abuse and neglect in care homes, it can be tempting to see installing security cameras as the answer. But Age UK very much doubts this is the case. I will indeed.
I simply want to say that I entirely endorse that. I mean, it cannot be a substitute for good quality care.
Indeed.
The question, and I think the examples I was trying to give, showed that in areas where there is an attempt at delivering really good quality care, it has actually served to improve it. But clearly, if you simply rely on it because it's a fail-safe, then that's going to be maybe even worse than the current position in such a care home.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with the honourable gentleman, and I'm just going to move on actually to address the other point about high quality care. But before I do, I'll just finish this point first, but I will come back to what the honourable gentleman said. The fact is that cameras will offer some protection to vulnerable and elderly people in care homes, and I don't think anyone would dispute that. But they cannot, by definition, they cannot be everywhere on the premises. So, by definition, their impact will necessarily be limited. So, it's important that we all understand, as both relatives of elderly residents and those working in care homes and seek to improve them, the CCTV should not be seen as promising more protection than it can, in reality, deliver. But it's important to remember that abuse and neglect can be subtle and it can be disguised. And cameras may not, but they may not easily pick up such subtlety and studied disguise. And I'll go back to the point I made earlier about trust between residents, staff and the families of residents. If care homes do not operate on trust, then they are truly lost. It is essential that care homes command the trust of residents and their families, whether or not there are cameras in place. The Honourable Lady talked about raising the standards in care homes, and I think we can all agree on that. That's, I think, why we're all here today. But I just want to go back to the point the Honourable Gentleman said earlier, that care homes, I think we would all understand, they find it increasingly difficult to recruit and retain suitable staff. And I think we really need to have more effort in that area and more support for care homes in that regard, because that, I think, is the most positive way forward. The sad fact is our elderly relatives are in care homes because they need good quality and very, very patient support in their senior years. But too often, Mr Chair, those providing that support are undervalued and underpaid by wider society. Those who do this extremely challenging job of looking after our elderly relatives need to have more recognition for the very demanding and very challenging work they do, and I'm sure that all of us will agree on that. And the Right Honourable Member for Beaconsfield has set out the challenges in staff morale, which I think really demands our attention. I think we can all agree that caring for people with dementia, particularly dementia, is extremely challenging, and those who do it and who do it well deserve to be applauded for their ability to do it every single day. CCTV may well have a place, but it is not and it cannot, and I don't think anybody is suggesting that it is the answer to the very important question: how can we better support and care for our older people in their twilight years with the best possible support staff, the most highly motivated staff who are suitably and appropriately valued by society? Because if we can achieve that, Mr Chair, we will have done a huge amount to improve our care homes and the care experience of older people.